The following video covers the skill of organizing a paper, and will treat organization broadly. In the video we will discuss ordering and grouping information and how to determine what content should be included and excluded from a paper.
Do you suffer from confusion, uncertainty, or misunderstanding when it comes to organizing papers? Do those old techniques you learned in middle school and high school no longer seem to work? Are you constantly getting grades that do not reflect your sheer brilliance? Well, listen up. You deserve better, and there's someone who can help you. Introducing Professor Thomas and his groundbreaking, patented, and proven organizational system.
Hi, Professor Thomas here, and I'm here today to talk about a fabulous new product. This is called organization. Organization? What is that? Well, it helps with the structure or coherence or logical ordering of your paragraphs and can lead to not only having your audience be able to follow your arguments and understand how all your ideas fit together, but it can even increase your grades. What's not great about that, right? Alright, so organization. How does this product work? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at it. Okay, so first of all, organizing involves making conscious decisions. For example, an organized house or apartment does not stem forth from some process of osmosis. It's not spontaneous. It involves conscious decisions about where we place things. When we enter the house, we'll place our raincoats on the coat rack. We'll put dishes in this cabinet, couches in the family room, etc. And we want this stuff in places where we and others will expect it, in places that make sense. And this making sense is sometimes dependent on logic, like it makes sense to store dishes in the kitchen where you're cooking, but things are also based on convention. It's just the way things are done. For instance, most British homes have washing machines in the kitchen. From a building perspective, this makes sense as most of the water hookups and pipes are in the kitchen. Similarly, many academic papers include the thesis at the end of the introductory paragraph. There is some sense to this, but also it's a convention. It's generally how academic writing is done. Similarly, with arranging a paper, we want to be conscious about why we are placing information in particular places, and not simply arranging those things haphazardly. So, at its most basic, organization involves making decisions about what things should be grouped together, about the ordering of that information, and decisions about what things should be included and excluded from that grouping. For instance, if we're organizing our movie collection, we might decide that we want to sort by genre. Horror movies go here, action movies here, comedies here, etc. Then we have to make decisions about what belongs or does not belong in those groupings. Is Star Wars sci-fi? Is it action? Or is it fantasy? We might also ask questions about the ordering of that info. Alphabetical order, by what has been watched and not, etc. Well, just imagine that you've done a great deal of brainstorming and have generated a bunch of ideas and even had the start of an argument. Well, how do you arrange all those ideas into paragraphs? How should you start? What goes first, second, third? The decision to place information or groups of information in certain areas should be determined based on what we know about our readers. What do they know? What do they not know? What can we assume they believe, or what will they have a hard time believing? What intrigues them? What would they find most persuasive and least persuasive? So let me give you an example. If I can expect my audience to be skeptical about a particular idea, I might want to leave that idea until later in a paper and slowly work up to that idea. For instance, here's a ridiculous example. If I want my readers to believe that aliens have landed on Earth, I don't want to start off with that idea and try to defend that idea right away, but instead work with some smaller, less debatable arguments related to that idea. For instance, I might try to prove that there's been strange interstellar metals have been found on Earth, or there's some strange disappearances in town, or how others have seen unidentified objects in the sky, or maybe that there's evidence of a government cover-up, stuff like that. In this way, I could show readers that some smaller, less debatable, but nonetheless connected arguments are reasonable so that they might eventually be more susceptible to believing my big, more debatable idea later on. I'll come back to ordering your ideas, but for now, we organize to help our readers understand, appreciate, and be persuaded by our arguments. And our readers appreciate three things to appear logical to them. Okay, they want connections from paragraph to paragraph or from paragraph to thesis. They also want a logical ordering of information, and they want logical groupings of information. The great COG, C-O-G. Organization is an important cog in the machinery of a successful paper. So we're going to take a look at these three elements. Without question, the most important organizing feature of your essay is your thesis statement. We want everything in your paper to connect to the thesis. The thesis should govern and control the paper's contents. And given that we have this understanding, we can note that if the thesis is truly an indication of the paper's entire argument, then it should help guide your entire paper. Bear in mind that your thesis may need some tweaking and work throughout the writing process, and you cannot always rely fully on the thesis to organize a paper when that thesis is not fully formed, because it may change, or your thesis might not fully capture all the complexities within your argument. But for our sake, let's just suppose that we have this good thesis statement that's relatively complete. By facilitating cooperation, elevating mood, and encouraging empathy, video games have a lasting positive effect on social behavior and thereby dispel commonly held stigmas about video games and violence. Okay, so looking at this thesis statement, first we notice that I have two related claims. And that is one, that video games have positive effects on social behavior. And two, that this understanding about positive effects dispels or gets rid of stigmas. Okay, now we can start to ask questions about the ordering, the second part of the COG. What claim makes sense to start first, and which one should come next? Well, logically, right, it doesn't make sense for us to prove that stigmas are invalid first, right? Our readers have no reason to believe this because our first claim helps prove the second claim. That is, if I can show that playing video games helps you interact with others and play nice and all that stuff, then that should prove that the biases and negative beliefs that people hold about video games are incorrect. Also, we can order the thesis's reasons. Which should come first? Cooperation, mood, or empathy? Which one would be easier to prove to my audience might be something I could ask. That might need to go first, whatever's the easiest. Which one would have a greater impact? Or I could ask, what's the most significant thing of these three reasons? And that might be good to leave towards the end of the paper. Or I could ask, what's the most debatable thing? And that's the one thing I want to leave towards the end. The more foundational ideas will go towards the beginning of my paper because we're trying to build toward an argument. And this way the paper is like a staircase where the step before helps support and hold up the ideas that follow. So anyway, cooperation might be the least debatable. The one my readers might not need too much information and reasons to believe. They may have already seen people play video games together in teams. But other ideas like empathy or understanding other people's perspectives, they might not believe those. And I might be benefited from putting that idea towards the end of my paper, because my idea about cooperation and working together might actually ultimately help me prove the empathy claim as well. So I'll place cooperation somewhere near the beginning of the paper, and I'll leave the empathy idea towards the end of the paper. So as you can see, I'm asking questions about my reader to determine my ordering. What is most debatable? What is most impactful? Really, I'm asking, what does my reader depend on in order that they understand, appreciate, and believe my argument? This is the key question for ordering information. What things should they know first? Which things should they know second? And now that they know those two things, what does that help them understand later? Okay, so back to my example. What do they need to know first about my claim? Well, to prove that video games have positive effects and take away negative stigmas, they probably need to know that a negative stigma exists. If they do not believe that video games are discussed negatively, then they will not appreciate my argument about stigmas. So I'll talk about stigma in the media first. On a related note, they might also need to know why it's harmful or unproductive to attach these negative thoughts and discussions about video games. Because just because something is true or not does not mean someone is going to care about it. I need to show why these negative opinions are damaging so that people have reason to care about my topic and therefore my paper. Then I could probably get into those 3 other reasons I discussed. Then another paragraph maybe about at the end about how these studies reverse these misconceptions about video games. Okay, so I should note that there are probably multiple ways that I could organize this argument. Some probably working better than others. The important thing to consider is that you have reasons for why you're placing the information where you are, and hopefully that logic transfers to the reader. So what if I do not have an excellent thesis statement? How could I organize then? Well, again, we want to remember COG, the cog. Organization is one of the cogs in great writing. So let's say I have the following basic thesis statement. Video games affect behavior positively. Okay, next, when I'm brainstorming, I could come up for reasons why I believe this statement's true. I'm trying to think of all the ideas that help prove or connect to this statement. Well, I believe video games affect behavior positively because video games make you happy when you play. Also, video game mechanics are set up for multiplayer play. Video games encourage camaraderie. Video games and shootings, like the Columbine shooters, played violent video games. Maybe that has something to do with behavior in video games. Studies have shown video games increase empathy. That could be another reason. There have been studies to suggest that video games release dopamine when you play. I could also say video games help create friendships when working together. Or video games help players see other perspectives. Or video games often are linked to violence in the media. Okay, so now that I've come up with a bunch of ideas, I might start looking at these things in relation to the COG, C-O-G. First, we might want to ask questions about connections. What things don't seem to connect to the thesis? Well, right now, my thesis, video games affect behavior positively, has nothing to do with violence or the media. So I can get rid of those. All those reasons that don't have anything to do with behavior, positive behavior, right, that's not in my thesis. If I decide to change my thesis to include this claim, then maybe they'll connect. Next, I want to start grouping information. Okay? What things are related or connected? Well, video games make you happy seems related to studies that talk about releasing dopamine. Similarly, multiplayer play, camaraderie, and creating friendships are related. So I can group all of those together. Now, perhaps those playing together ideas need to be collapsed into one paragraph on cooperation or something, or maybe I have enough information to create 2 or 3 paragraphs on that topic. Either way, I'll want to have those ideas probably grouped together so that my reader can follow my ideas a little easier. And finally, after we've made sure everything connects to the thesis and we started grouping together related information, then we can start logically ordering information as we've already discussed earlier in the video. One last thing I'll say is that I've been talking about organization in the beginning stages of paper writing. But you can look at it after you've written a paper as well. You know, after you've written a draft, you should ask organizational questions like, does this paragraph connect to the thesis? Does my ordering of paragraphs make sense? And are my ideas within each paragraph grouped together in a logical way? Okay, so that's our video on organization. Remember to take the quiz, and good luck.